Hello, and welcome to the Finding the Unicorn in You podcast. What a beautiful day to inspire lives. My name is Jaime Gabriel RAYGOZA, your host, and I am so excited to have you here. Let's get ready to meet some fantastic unicorns and learn how to unleash the inner unicorn in you. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Finding the Unicorn in You. Today, I have a very good friend that I've known since elementary school. We went through several years of school together, and even after, we still kept in touch. In his musical talent and everything that he does. Let him introduce a little bit more about himself. I have Mr. Kevin Phan.
Oh, hello.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently working on.
I'm Kevin. Let's see. I am a pianist and an organist based here in Orange County. The majority of my work is based in a lot of classical music. I did my bachelor's in collaborative piano at Cal State Fullerton, and then I'm currently pursuing my master's in organ performance. Just started this semester in the fall, so that's a lot of fun. A lot of my work is kind of a combination of freelancing at churches and various gigs that I get, and then combining that with different kinds of stable jobs. It's kind of the epitome of what I would call like the 21st century musician's career of doing 60,000 things to make a living.
I know that when we were younger, you were more into string instruments, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you started with the violin, right?
I did, yeah.
So what inspired you to kind of go from the string to the piano and the organ?
Oh, wow. That is okay. That's a long story. Yeah. So I started with the violin. I think we started in fifth grade or something like that. It's when we had those music classes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a squeaky little instrument to play and learn. But it was great. I learned a lot playing that instrument. You learn so much about training your ear on strings. When I got to high school, I joined choir with, and the director there is Suzanne Brickey at Service the High School. And actually, when I first went to college, I was actually majoring in the voice performance. So I was studying to do like opera singing sort of deal. And throughout this like whole entire time, like through elementary school and middle school and high school, I always had this particular drawing to the piano. But, we grew up in a city that's not very affluent and where the socioeconomic status is, quite low. And classical music really is geared towards those with more privileged financially. A lot of students study at the age of 3, 4, 5 years old and studying with some of the best teachers in the world, and then not to mention a piano is not relatively cheap either to buy. And so even through that whole time, and I was through college, I was like drawn to this particular instrument, and I was working and I was practicing and stuff and playing for fun, and always wished that I could kind of take that jump and switch to the piano. But I just kind of felt like the odds were stacked against me. At this point, I think I switched when I was, let's say, 22 years old is when I officially made the plunge and switched majors from voice performance to piano performance. And I was just thinking like, I don't know. I don't know that this is going to be worth it in the long run, because at the end of the day, you have bills to pay. You have to make a living somehow. But I remember at one point I said that I would try it for 3 years. I would switch, I would get my bachelor's. And if it didn't pan out for me, at least I did it for 3 years. And I can say that at least when I'm 50, there was not that regret that, oh, I never got to study the instrument that I really felt a strong passion and calling towards for my entire life. It has thankfully worked out for me for the better. I just remember that being like my midlife crisis, I would call it, or quarter life crisis, is like, do I make this plunge and will it work out for me?
A lot of individuals don't take that risk. Like I'm one of those individuals. I started off doing the clarinet at the same time, and I really loved it. I was taking private classes at March the Rose Parade. I was in it, and then at college, my freshman year, I realized that, like you said, it's not a career that is going to make you money right away, and it's going to be hard for individuals. And the reason I decided not to even go that route and go more into social work was because my private instructor, it took her 10 years to get into like an actual orchestra that she wanted. And even then, she was at the last chair, lowest paying position. And she's like, I still have to work my way up. And she was like in her mid 40s. And I was just like, is that the lifestyle that I want? And am I willing to wait that long for the passion? She was uber talented, positive and great. And I loved her, but I just wasn't willing to make that risk. And I think what you're doing is so powerful just because you believe in yourself and you're like, I'm gonna get there one way or another. So I applaud you for sticking with your guns because I do miss it. I miss the musicality of it, the art that you create, and it's such a beautiful experience to make music that people will sit down and watch you for. Right now, what are some things that you're doing with the music that you play with the piano and the organ? So what are some gigs that you're booking right now?
It's funny you asked that because the past 3 months, 3 or 4 months, I would say has been a and post-pandemic-ish. I would like call this like the first academic year where things have returned to a sense of normalcy in terms of gigging and stuff. And the past 3 months, I would say I found a lot of opportunities to play, a lot of ways to make more money working less, which is has been my whole goal after the pandemic. Because at a certain point in your career as like a musician, you have to hustle and you have to do all the playing for free, driving around a lot, playing for those gigs that you hope will open a future door, and that you know you're spending more time and energy than you are getting paid for. And I am very lucky that in the past few years and very recently, I am able to say I'm giving out more no's than I'm saying yes. And that is a very wonderful feeling. And I'm so, so, so fortunate to be in that position. But currently, I just accepted a new job in Manhattan Beach as the principal organist there at a fantastic church on a two manual pipe organ. It sounds beautiful. They gave me I negotiated a really nice salary there. And just the benefits and compensation for that job has been more than I thought was going to be offered for a part-time job like that. And then also this year, I was offered a staff position at Cal State Dominguez Hills to be one of their pianists on staff. And so I would say those are like the two highlights of my professional career right now. I do some various gigging here at various churches that ask me to come play and sub and things like that. And then I have my own piano students that I teach of about, I would say I'm at 12 piano students right now in my studio. And that encompasses my whole week. I do grad school. Oh, and then I also play for a professional course. It's called Meister Singers. We rehearse every Sunday, and we have like 5 or 6 concerts throughout the year. This year, we're playing a few concerts in San Francisco, and then the group is also going to Scotland and Ireland for some touring this summer and just singing at various places and just having a grand old time.
So it sounds like your schedule's pretty intense.
Just a little bit, just a little bit.
So talk about doing the most. That's awesome. So how do you stay organized and how do you keep track of all of like these different tasks and things that you do?
uh, you know, I think I've always sort of been this person that has always juggled many different things at one time. So this particular schedule is like really nothing new for me. I really take it, I would say 1 to 2 weeks at a time, and just really prioritizing the biggest things that I know are coming up first, and prepping for things that at this point in my career, I know what things take the longest time. And so if I know that I'm playing a particular recital or concert, I have to start prepping that music months and months in advance, and then really kicking it into gear the few weeks before the performance happens. But that I can't leave certain things to the end. The calendar is my biggest friend. I'm also really lucky that my schedule allows for a lot of flexibility, that between the Cal State job, because I'm a staff pianist, so I get to basically set schedules with my students at the time that I want. This week, I said I'm not going to be there Tuesday, but I'll be there Thursday. So everyone just shows up on Thursday for the lessons. And then when things get busy, I have to weed certain things out. And I just tell people way in advance, I will not be teaching this week because I have no time, just no absolute life this week. And so it's really a big old juggling act. It really is. And it's not about doing everything at once, but rather prioritizing the things that need to come first and then catching up after those big projects are done, and communicating that really early so that parents and students are happy, and that then you're still showcasing the best parts of yourself, because that's really important at this point. So everyone knows who I am. If I'm presenting anything that's less than my best, people are aware and they know. Like anytime I play now, it is now my work. So I can't show up to concerts and play at half my capacity. I have to be at full on every single time.
Makes sense. And I think what you said is very important. You have to be able to prioritize things that you want to accomplish every day. Everybody has this misconception that you make a list of all your tasks and by the end of the day you have to finish your list. And I think that's impossible, if not like it's insane to think that you're going to finish everything on your to-do list. It's not your to-do list is always going to be piled on with new tasks, new events, new things in any career that you do and in your personal life, and you just have to pick the important ones that you want to tackle that day, and then the rest. You should have two lists, one with your daily tasks and one with everything else, and then just pick from that and then balance it out as it goes. But life is going to happen. Things are not always going to go the way that you want it, and you're never going to complete your full list every single time.
Oh, absolutely. The listing is ridiculous. It works for a lot of people. I find that lists get really, what's the word? It's like they're a little stress inducing because then you really get to see a tangible like list of all the things that you haven't done yet.
Exactly. It's that whole feeling, am I doing enough? Am I failing in this? But it's not that. It's you're still succeeding as long as you do one thing at a time and as long as you're trying.
Yeah, and one of the quotes that has always stuck out to me was by Venus Williams, I think. And she was I forgot what interview she was in, but she was one of the older tennis players on tour. I think she's still competing. I'm not entirely sure. I've since left that world behind. I just remember her saying in some interview that she wakes up every day and does a little bit of the things that she always enjoys. And for her, that is playing tennis, and she loves it. And so she makes an effort to always do just a little bit every single day. And that for her is enough. And sometimes, like especially as musicians, it can get so exhausting that we forget to do the things that we love to do. Like you should love to play your instrument. And sometimes the hardest part about practicing is sitting down and starting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's all in our head too. And like you said, remind yourself, why am I doing this? And if you want to start by playing something that you enjoy, just to get you started and then get you in the mood and then actually start playing something.
Absolutely.
We mentioned a lot of good qualities that are making people successful that would allow them to move to the next level. As you know, like unicorns are individuals that are rare to find in the community and are consistently breaking the boundary and moving and growing as individuals and inspiring others. So for you, what are some qualities that you would see either in your industry or just in general that you would say these are unicorn qualities that it would make people successful?
What's interesting is that in the musical field, I have found that it's so, so, so important to be like an intrinsically good person. A kind and compassionate human being will take you so much further than being an expert on your instrument. I went to school with hundreds and hundreds of musicians, all in various different fields. And it's really crazy how sometimes the most talented aren't the ones outside of school, because there are a lot of politics that are involved with school and who gets the most opportunities in school. Now, once you leave that, that's a whole different ballgame that you have to play. And I find that it's the people that are good at networking, who are like really kind, compassionate, easy to work with, and who are competent in their field and their instrument are the ones that tend to be the most successful. Because at the end of the day, there is a lot of people that can do my job, but how many of us do you want to actually work with on a regular basis is whittles that down very small. I have found that to be the biggest asset right now is that there's a lot of people, but do you want to work with them?
Humility will take you a long way. And being in that field for a little bit, not as much, but I did see that there's people who have great talent and they could be the best performers in the orchestra, but if their ego gets in the way, it's super toxic to work with. So why am I going to work with that individual on an everyday basis, weekly basis, when I can rather have maybe the second chair or the third chair, and have them work there, and it's still going to sound great, but it's going to be easier to work with those individuals, and it is who you know as well and who you're willing to work with.
Because music is a very emotional craft. When you like the people that you work with, oftentimes it sounds better because you're on the same page and you connect musically and emotionally versus working with someone who is inflexible.
Yes, and you have to have some passion, just the same as like you see people singing and performers who are in theater or in Broadway. you have to be able to tap some type of emotion to be able to connect with the music. It sounds silly, but you do, there's like this little inner you that you have to say, or you're tapping into your inner child and really feeling the mood and feeling the music. And it's such an amazing thing when you see somebody who's playing with their heart rather than with their mind.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the best things about live performance and watching live musicians is you can just tell when someone just loves what they do.
With this, as we know, this episode's going to be aired in February. So I am bringing in the concept of the rose-colored glasses. So what this is people are genuinely happy or in a positive attitude in situations where they fail to notice the negative things that are actually occurring to them. This leads a view that is not really realistic. If you want to share a time in your life where maybe you had those rose-colored glasses on, and how did you get through that moment?
Recently, I was offered a job that's really nice. It was at a community college. It had the potential to turn into this sort of full-time gig position, but it would just start off really poorly. 4 days a week, 5 days a week, but for like 1 or 2 hours each day, which is really not a great position to be in. And it had this particular promise of, oh, maybe in 2 to 3 years, there's this potential for it to become something greater than what it currently is. But at face value, it is what it is currently, right? And it was going to be somewhere in Huntington Beach. I live in Fullerton. There's no easy way to get there. It would be a 40-minute drive, parking, and then getting into the building and doing all that stuff for maybe an hour and a half of work. I would ultimately be spending more time driving than I would be actually working. But those positions in particular right now are so few and far between. And the people that hold these positions often hold them until they retire. Those positions in themselves are like little unicorns. Like they are so rare, so rare. And I wanted to do everything within my power to like hang on to it. I was talking with the director in negotiations for a long time and trying to see how we could make this work. And then being like, oh, I can suffer through hours of traffic and I can do that drive because it's all going to be worth it in the long run, right? I had to finally sit down with my fiance and he was just like, no. And he's the best. He'll just sit there and just be like blatantly like that's just not going to work. It's like just like write it down. Think about what your week would be. Like what you would get in terms of compensation is not worth the maybe that it would be something else. I used to say yes to a lot of everything. And so for me, this just seemed like the opportunity of a lifetime when it really isn't, right? Like if now, like 3 months after the fact, I'm like, wow, I was so stupid. That's a no-brainer. That is a clear no. But as this point in my career where I'm trying to build a life, right? And build these professional opportunities that on a resume speak a lot for themselves, I was just so enamored with the idea of working at college and it being a staff position that I really wanted to make it work. And sometimes when you're talking with your friends, the way that you sway the conversation elicits a particular response from them, right? But I was really lucky with my fiance that he just blatantly was just like, it is not going to work.
And that's good. That's good because I was going to say for these type of situations, it's so hard to get out of, especially when you're like, this is a really good opportunity. This is once in a lifetime, at least like you said, what you were feeling at the time. But then if it compromises so much of you and it's taking away from you rather than giving you things, then that's when the situation is rose colored because we are seeing it a lot more romanticized, a lot more at a higher level than it really is. And you need people in your side, in your pocket to be like, no, let's take a step back. That's not the way that this is actually being painted.
Exactly. And I think what's really nice is that my fiance's name is Miles. He's not a musician by trade. And so he offers a very different perspective on, how to approach things like this. So it works out.
Definitely, you have a very good unicorn in your pocket right there.
Yes, this is absolutely true.
I think a lot of us end up wearing these rose-colored glasses out of necessity or desperation when we really want it. at that time. So we were like, you know what, that's not so bad. Like I know I have some friends right now that are looking for jobs. They come to me and they're like, oh, this is really good position. It pays this much. And I just have to go into the office 5 days a week now. And I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. You're working remotely. You're saving money on gas. You're saving time. You have the flexibility of like doing whatever you want at home, and you're going to go back into the office, which means you're going to be stuck 2 hours in traffic. You're going to be wasting all this gas. So is it really going to be, is that little pay bump that they're willing to give you going to be enough to sacrifice everything that all the like the benefits that you have right now? They're like, I didn't think it that way. I think, yeah, I don't think that's worth it. And I was like, yeah, we need to know our value and what we're good for. And I'm glad that you made that realization.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I'm not necessarily in this field to make lots of money, make more money. My biggest motto right now is I want to get paid the same and work less.
I like that. What reasons do you think that you're a unicorn?
I would say my biggest quality, and as I don't know, as boring as it may be, um, I work extremely hard and I
Mm-hmm.
care a lot about my craft.
Okay.
I was always the one in school that you would see being the last one to leave the building because I was always practicing. I remember when I was doing my recitals, I was practicing from to like 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, and that was working starting at 8 in the morning, doing other things, and then practicing till late at night. And I feel like a lot of people, a lot of colleagues and mentors really want to support people who are really working hard towards something. Like talent and all that aside, when you see someone who has the grit and who is sweating and really working for something, it is inspiring to help them. And that I think has been one of my biggest assets in getting to where I am now is just really putting in a lot of work. And this is one of those careers that if you don't put in the work, it's just not going to happen.
I
You know?
agree. And I think this is a quality that can be applied in any position or anything that you really want in life because nothing's going to be handed to you and nothing's going to be, especially, where we grew up and then the social economic status that we were in. This is not opportunities that just fall in our laps. We really have to work ourselves and make ourselves noticeable for people to be like, hey, I also count. I also matter. I have a lot of talent over here. Notice me. So you have to grind. And if you don't grind, then it's really hard to do what you want and to settle for yourself for less or for things that are not necessarily going to make us happy.
No, absolutely. And I would say one of the biggest benefits of growing up in that kind of culture is that you have to learn how to grind. It's almost like you realize at a certain point, like, okay, you have this realization that you kind of start to feel like you know where you are, where your place is in this world as a younger age, right? At least I did. And I was like, okay, if I really want to make something in this world or make a place for myself and really do something, I have to work for it. And I was lucky to have learned that really young and have cultivated this, skill to work and be happy doing that because some people aren't. They don't like the grind and it's very hard for them to do so. I would say like, I read this awesome book and the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing was like sometimes you see your weaknesses just as your weaknesses and you don't realize how some of those actually become your strength. Because one of my biggest, I would say, demons as earlier in my career was that I always felt so inferior to other people, mostly because I didn't have the kind of training that they all had at a young age. And so you think like, this is never going to work out for me. And to realize that that has helped me in some sense, because at this age of my life, and this age is like really when I'm 25, 24, 23, right? Is like, I really want it. So because I really want it, I am working so much harder than everyone else in like that all my other colleagues. And the time that you spend as a 23-year-old for 6 hours is spent so much more fruitfully than when you're 7 or 8 being forced by your parents to do the thing that you really don't want to do. And so once I learned to shift my perspective and trying to not think of my weaknesses so poorly on myself, that really helped me move forward and really build a career as well.
It's a very big obstacle, I think, especially like for in our cultures, that we sometimes are pressured to live our parents' dream and not our own dream. And that is something that is super hard to say, hey, I appreciate what you want for me, but that's not my life. And I want this. And I think that is so hard to get through. So when you just try to actually do the things that you love, you'll have passion for it and actually try harder than those individuals, like you said, are very talented, but they're there because their parents said, you're really good at this. You should do this. But if they don't have the talent for it, it's going to show, and they're not going to put as much effort as like you would, who actually is there because of yourself and because of your your inner passion for it.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
So with that, would you say get like ignites the passion or the love for what you do? And for someone who maybe not is not having that passion in the current career, what advice do you have for them so that they can seek their passion?
What ignites my passion? I think at the core of my being, I love to just make music. Like there is like it is so awesome. Whether it's on the piano or the organ, like there is no other feeling on this planet or universe that comes close to like me sitting down and getting to just spontaneously create music and just create craft and go through the whole cycle of emotions between playing something that is angsty and fiery and with some anger to the most melancholic of pieces and drowning in your sorrows for a good 10 minutes. Music is so selfish for me because I just love to play for myself. Like at the end of the day, I love to play for myself, and if you want to listen, great. And if you'll pay me to do it, even better. But at the end of the day, I just love to play for myself. And I think that's intrinsically a big part of it is I am just completely drawn to this. And when I step away from my instruments for like, I'm going on vacation next week, and I know I'm going to get the itch to come and play an instrument that I'm not going to get to fulfill for a week. And it's going to suck, and I'll get over it. I think when it comes to building a career, I think the most important question I always asked myself was, what could I see myself working hard for? Because everything is going to take time and sacrifice and compromise. And passion is not enough to sustain any of that. You have to be willing to work hard for it. And if you won't work hard for it, then it's not going to possibly come into fruition for you.
You have to be able to do that self audit and ask yourself what are the things that I'm passionate for, and like you said, what sacrifices am I willing to do for the if you're not willing to sacrifice everything or at least a portion of yourself for the thing that you're passionate for, then maybe that's not the right passion you have to pursue. Same thing with me. I was always saying I want to be an author, and I was going to quit my job and just write books and try to make it big, but realistically that's really hard. And like you said, I have to pay the bills, and if the books aren't selling, then I'm not going to get money for it, and I can't just be writing like little articles for $25 at a time. Yeah, I just wasn't willing to put all my balls in that court because I minored in creative writing, but I decided that wasn't going to be my thing. I really did a self audit in college, and it wasn't until my junior year, because I started off as a biology major. Then I went to creative writing, and then I went to bioengineering, and then I went finally to sociology. And what led me to that was, what is it that I really like to do, and what is going to bring me the drive to get there? And it was helping people. And even then, I was like, I'm going to be a social worker, and I'm going to do that route. But being in the social work field, I decided, it's not that I like working with the clients. I like working with the employees that help the clients. And that way I can fix the system above so that the delivery of service can be better. I didn't figure it out until years later. It's okay that you don't know, but make risks little by little. But like you said, do that. What am I passionate for? And then go that route. And eventually your true passion and your true career will blossom over time.
Yeah, it's that is totally true. And I think we also all have to be ready to adapt and be flexible and change. You never know when you are being called to a particular different calling in life, or that you find yourself being drawn to different things. And I think it's important throughout our lives to acknowledge, as we change and grow as human beings, that our career is okay to change too. And it doesn't mean that you are failing or giving up on a particular thing. but rather that your interests have changed. You are now a different person than you are 10, 15 years ago. Whatever, like, in terms of biology, I'm sure there's like oh, every 15 years your cells, blah, blah, blah. But it's true, like we're constantly growing and shifting, and our world is just changing so, so, so fast these days. Like it is just wildly changing. And one of the biggest advice I got from one of my college professors, he told me, and this was when I was deciding whether I wanted to do my master's in organ or something else. And since last March, I had just found like myself being thrown into this organ world very, very fast and being wildly successful and having a grand time. And I was just like, I don't know that, like, what is there for me after I graduate? What do I do with this? And he was just like, just be flexible. Just see where your life and where the tide and the current is taking you, and just take a risk and go. What do you have to lose? But some money. Here I am losing money.
And it's true. You have to be willing to sacrifice something in order to move forward. And it's hard because not everybody wants to hear that. You want to hear that everything's going to be the way that you want it and you want to go it. But I think the way society expects us to know exactly what we want at 18 is dumb. It's not.
Oh, it's so dumb. We were told as children. I'm so mad about.
Oh yeah, it's like this whole like Disney like try really hard and you can be anything you want. And it's just like no.
Talk about rose-colored glasses. That is
Right.
the
That's the biggest rose-colored lie that I've ever heard. Yeah, and it's not true and it's not always going to go that route because you said your life is going to pivot into various different directions and you have to be okay with it. You have to be able to adapt. You have to be like water in a creek and just go wherever it takes you. Go to the easiest route. And sometimes we may not understand why we're going through something, but it's eventually going to click and you're like, I went through that and now because of that I got this opportunity and that opportunity, and just trust the process.
exactly.
So with that, what do you think is one of your biggest life challenges that you've had?
That's such a great question. I would say the biggest one that I have recently overcome is, so I grew up with eczema my entire life. Since, like, I was a little fetus, I'm sure I had a spot of eczema somewhere. It's like a particular topic I have found recently that is not talked about very often in terms of the amount of emotional trauma that people face who suffer from eczema. Because I find that a lot of us tend to find ways to adapt in society and hide those things, and we make it not quite so apparent. For example, in the last few decades, mental health has really come out of the woodworks, and people are really talking very openly about it. And eczema right now is still very sort of hidden. Not that it's taboo in any sense, but that because it's such a tangible thing that you can see, a lot of people try to hide it, you know. And I dealt with that my entire life. And growing up, kids are mean, man. Bullying that I received from having eczema and then being Asian as well. I find that the combination of those becomes a little mentally stinting in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
and that you are afraid to come out and be yourself, and that you start to hide your personality and who you are, and you are more afraid to show who you are, go out in public, be around people. It almost seems like you don't have much of a personality. I remember like times that you wear like long sleeves because you don't want your skin to be shown, or you avoid as many people as you can because you're having a flare up. You don't go to the pool party because cannot go in the pool. Remember doctors always saying, oh, you'll just, once you get through puberty, you'll grow out of it. Biggest lie on this planet. And I know many other people who have been told the same thing, and it's just simply not true. I find that that has been my biggest struggle, is in the past, let's say, I don't know, 7, 8 years, is really overcoming a lot of that and finding ways to grow into myself and be unashamed of who I am, and understanding like this is what I have to offer the world, believing in myself after coming through that trauma as a child has been the hugest mental and personal struggle emotionally, I would say. And I've come out of it as a much stronger person because of it. But that also came with, I just turned 30. So that is 30 years of struggle and many more to still come. But I have recently, and this may be too much information, And a little bit of a digression, but finally found a dermatologist, and we're on a series of medications it is perfect. It is just like, I was like, where was the answer to this 30 years ago? Because, um, science did not grow fast enough, apparently.
Thank you for sharing that. And I remember when you were younger, it wasn't, at least when I remember, it wasn't like a big flare, but you would have like some spots, and some days I would see it around your arms, and then some days I didn't. So it was like you said, it really the weather goes into play, your hormones go into play, a lot of different things. And then what works with one person may not necessarily work with another person because of their chemical makeup and the just, I know biology. I'm not really so good with that. But what would you say for individuals that are maybe going through this struggle and they have those insecurities?
It's one of those things that it's like you want to say that it gets better, and it does. It does get better, and that there is you have to put in the time to discover what works for you. Unfortunately, a lot of it also is trial and error. So it's like trying different things. And when it fails, it's not just a failure because you know that you've now checked off that box. This does not work. So that takes you one step closer to figuring out something that does work. And that is one of the biggest hurdles struggling with eczema, because with weather and where you're living, so many different factors are at play, you know. And when you switch jobs, let's say, you're also switching locations that you're working, if you're getting pets, things like that. And that it is really a lifelong struggle of being adaptable, you know. But I think that you have to find a very strong support system of friends who love you, finding a dermatologist and a doctor who is in your corner ready to fight for you, and be ready to shop around for that because there are bad doctors in this world as there are bad workers who work in their field. You know, just because they're a doctor and went through all those years of schooling doesn't mean that they are the most qualified to help you. And that is one thing that you have to do. You have to advocate for your own health. And that also means finding the right doctor who will do that for you.
Like going back with the bullying that you said, people are always going to say something, regardless if they were, especially when you're younger. The high school we grew up with, they were horrible at bullying. Maybe it was the times, and I don't want to like downplay it, but I got bullied so much, especially for me. It wasn't that I was not necessarily the most masculine guy out there. So for me, it was very evident that I was gay. And even people knew I was gay before I knew I was gay. And,
Probably.
I got bullied for this for such a long time. There was an incident where a group of guys actually threw me in the trash can and one of the dumpsters in the back. And it just got really bad that the principal had to get involved, and it was insane. But they always pick on something, and whether it be your name, I know people that got bullied because their name was a certain way and they made fun of that, or the way that they looked, or like you said, because of their certain appearance. And kids will always find something to bully you about, but you have to make sure that you love yourself for who you are, because you can't change that. These are people that are going to come and go in your life, but you're still going to be with you. So you have to get comfortable to love yourself and be authentic and be the person that you are, because that's not going to change. And like you said, you can get help in certain situations, but so there's certain part of us that it's us. It makes us who we are, and what you went through made you the person that you are today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you can't change how others perceive you and how they want to treat you, but how you view yourself and how you treat yourself on a daily basis, that is all under your control.
Exactly. Just because other people are bullying you doesn't mean you have to bully yourself too. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Who are some, or if you have one or many individuals that are your unicorns in your life that continue to inspire you to be the person that you are?
I would say Suzanne Bricky at Service High
Mm.
School, the choir director, which probably I would say is like my unicorn. And it's not because she is this like phenomenal musician and she is touring the world, um, you know, playing and singing everywhere, but rather she was, I would say, and even now, she is the closest person I have to a mom in a sense. Because I mean, I have my mom and dad are around, but we have such different cultures. They are as Vietnamese as it gets. And my mom is super Catholic. My dad is super Buddhist. So strange household to grow up in. And very adamantly wanted me to become a doctor or something. And their whole idea for having a child in America was to have this child that could make lots of money and then take care of them in their old age. And which is kind of a bad reason to have a kid, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, that is a whole other story of life.
Hmm.
And so they weren't the most nurturing humans. And Suzanne has, I mean, her and I talk all the time. I went back and worked at Service to High School for a few years as her pianist there. And she was the most supportive of my desires and my passions. And I'm very certain that without her, I wouldn't be where I am because I didn't have anyone else at that time who I respected and who loved me enough that would help push me in this direction. And that's an important part in our time, like where you decide to go to college and what you decide to study, especially for something like music, is kind of like you're always losing time in a sense, you know. And so she was really the one that pushed me to do what I really loved, you know. And I've been lucky throughout my time in school and in education that I've always come across a few mentors and professors that really wanted to invest their time in me and help me to succeed. So, Suzanne, you're the one.
That's beautiful. And I never really got to meet Suzanne. I was more on the other side. And like I was really exposed to like Laurie Musicant. And then after that, I went to high school and then it went somewhere else. I heard a lot of great things about her. I only had a few interactions with her, and that's just because we were sometimes shared the same room, you know, and I would cross to the other side. But she was always such a lively person, and everybody who worked with her in one aspect or another always said wonderful things about her. So that is beautiful what you said.
Yeah.
So if she's hearing this, I'll make sure she hears this. If you had one piece of advice for our listeners that you want them to kind of go home with, what would it be?
Like in all my wisdom and knowledge, what do I want to impart? I would say my biggest advice is to be ready to take risks in your career early on. I think we live in such a great place, at least here in Southern California and in other places here in the United States as well, where there is ample opportunity to grow and to discover lots of things about yourself. And I find too often when I was younger that I was too afraid to let go of whatever baggage I had that day, to really allow myself to grow and learn more about myself and really hop onto those opportunities with bravery and courage. And that is really how we allow ourselves to grow and move forward and learn more about ourselves, is by taking those risks that are really hard. And I find that as we get older, those risks also come with more consequences. And my biggest advice is to take those risks early on and make those mistakes and learn from them and make each day better.
I agree 1,000%. And I wish I would have heard that a long time ago. But even in our age, even though we're not so old, I I think it's still possible. It's just being willing to risk it for yourself. I think as long as you're risking it for you, things may not work the way that you want it to, but at least you can say you tried.
Absolutely.
And if our listeners want to follow you in your career, or if they just want to say hi, or they're like, hey, I'm thinking of getting into this career pathway, where can they reach you at?
I mean, you can follow me on Facebook. My name is Kevin Phan, Phan. There's quite a few of us because apparently that is a very common Vietnamese name. So you might have to dig around on Facebook. You can add me on Instagram and follow me on Instagram. My handle is FanKevin92 because I couldn't come up with anything creative, I guess, when Instagram was coming about. Or if you want to come hear me play the organ at Manhattan Beach UCC, and hear one of my big performances and stuff, I'll be doing that. And I'll have some recitals and stuff coming up here in Orange County. So if you follow me on one of my social media platforms, you can come and hear me play and hear some wonderful music sometime soon, hopefully.
Perfect. I'll make sure to go to at least a few of those so I can sit down.
Yeah.
But this has been an amazing interview. Thank you so much for all of your advice and for sharing so much about you. And for you listeners, if you enjoyed this content, make sure you subscribe and hit us a 5-star rating. But as you know, our episodes are out every Friday at 7 a.m. And until next time, thank you so much.